Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to Now We're Really Talking. Today I'm joined by Danny Bowman. Danny is an academic and a director at the Conservative Mental Health Group, and he brings powerful lived experience of Body Dysmorphic Disorder and Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. Before we begin, a quick note. In this episode, we speak openly about OCD and BDD. If that feels like too much right now, please take a break or skip the episode entirely. If you need support, you can call Samaritans on 116 123 or text SHOUT to 85258 for free confidential help. You'll also find resources in the episode description to learn more. Remember, you are not alone. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Now We're Really Talking, the podcast where we dive really deep into mental health stories and journeys. And today I'm really excited to be joined by Danny Bowman. Danny has done so much in the mental health space, kind of through lived experience. And some of you listening might have seen his story and not realised who it was a while ago. But I think, so many unique perspectives on mental health and so much to talk about. So get straight in. How are you doing, Danny?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you, Paddy?
Yeah, I'm good. It's the dark nights are closing in, and it seems to be going very fast towards Christmas. But apart from that, I'm doing okay. So I'll start off. When did you first discover what mental health was, and that? Secondly, when did you find out that what you were struggling with was mental health, and it wasn't just something normal?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to take you right back, prior to when I was diagnosed with OCD when I was 11, I didn't really have that much interaction with mental health. I had a pretty normal childhood, had a group of friends, played rugby, had a very loving family. It was all going really well. But when I turned around 10 years old, I started to develop certain kind of obsessions, certain kind of rituals that I used to undertake. And for a 10-year-old, that was terrifying to me because I didn't know what was going on. It was really, really difficult. And my whole life kind of started to unravel quite quickly. It was, some of the thoughts I was getting was, that potentially my parents could be in a car crash if I didn't do X, Y, and Z rituals. And for a 10-year-old to kind of carry that, as many people will know with mental illness, it can be really, really difficult. So that was kind of a very, very quick introduction to what mental health was. And from that point, I had an interesting teenage years.
Yeah, something that I really resonate with. I started talking about my mental health and counselling at 13, and even then, I didn't realise that all these thoughts that I was having, I knew that it was a weight, but I didn't realise what it actually was. So how did day-to-day, how did the OCD you talked about having thoughts that parents in a car crash if you don't do certain things, how did it kind of manifest day-to-day?
Yeah, so I started to develop I had to undertake rituals. So my home life became quite difficult. I had a massive field in front of my house and I had to run around it a certain number of times until it felt just right, which was exhausting. At school, I had to put my hand up and shout out because I thought if I didn't, that something bad would happen. And obviously that got me into a little bit of trouble in the classroom. And, there was, other quite difficult rituals that I used to have to do. And as you will know, Paddy, it's extremely exhausting. And as a kind of 10-year-old to kind of start developing them sort of difficulties and also not really knowing what it was really, really hard. And, we're talking pre-time to change as well. So the idea of speaking about mental health was really, really difficult. Back then, when people spoke about mental health, they were talking about violence, they were talking about risk, they were talking about danger. They weren't talking about kind of compassion and help and anti-stigma campaigns. So the idea of opening up at that stage was really, really difficult. So, I kept it quiet. My parents kept it quiet for a long time.
Did you have a kind of backlash where you said teachers got into trouble, but how was it doing these things in front of kind of classmates? Because how I experience this, it's a no-win situation, isn't it? If you don't do them, you think something's bad going to happen, but do them, you worry about how others are going to view you.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I had a terrible time at school. I think it happened so quickly. So as I described beforehand, I had a solid group of friends, was doing okay at my schoolwork, and then very, very quickly that kind of unraveled. Started to kind of distance myself from my kind of core friends group. As you can imagine, I was getting quite a lot of detentions as well, partially because of the actions that I was doing, the OCD. So obviously that got me into trouble. My education fell behind. So, you know, at school it was really, really difficult because I couldn't talk about it. And I think for a lot of people that's part of the problem. But back then it was just so difficult to really open up about it. And the education system also just didn't have the facilities available to kind of support me, which I think we've got a lot better at. But obviously back then it was just not the case.
So you got diagnosed at 11. What was the kind of reaction? Did you get treatment then, or was it a slower process towards finding out and then getting help?
So I was very lucky. This is kind of one of the positives, I guess, of the story. At the time, sadly, there was nothing locally, but nationally there was. So I travelled from Newcastle to London, to the Maudsley Hospital to get the support I needed. So I did kind of 12 sessions, did some CBT, was really, really helpful. For a brief, a period of time, I kind of started to recover a bit. But it was, as you will know, it's never a linear line kind of with mental health. And I kind of slipped back and forth. But the Maudsley Hospital were absolutely brilliant. I had to wait, of course, quite a while to get that support. But when I did, it was very useful.
It's good to hear that you got support, but as you say, it's sad that you have to be lucky to get that support.
Yeah.
When it's a day-to-day struggle, the weight that we carry. So if we fast forward a little bit further in your story, I mentioned before people might have seen articles about you maybe 10 years ago. Can you just explain why your story went viral?
Absolutely. So when I was OCD and BDD, Body Dysmorphic Disorder, which is when you become deeply concerned with a flaw in your appearance, but it's not vanity at all. It bothers you so much that actually you become quite reclusive. You kind of withdraw from things, and that's what I started to develop BDD. So I was concerned about my skin, my nose, pretty much every part of my body. And that became extremely debilitating to the point where I became housebound. So I had to drop out of education. I ended up spending 10 hours in the mirror, taking lots of pictures of myself to scrutinize my skin. I ended up losing a lot of weight. And then obviously that was a really, really difficult period. I went to a really, really dark place. But one of the positives from that, I guess, was that after experiencing all of that in my kind of childhood, I really, really wanted to try and make a difference in mental health. So I partnered with a charity that's no longer there, but was amazing, called Fixes UK. And I started what I thought would be a small campaign on body dysmorphic disorder. And lucky for me, the campaign went viral. It went into an international audience. So I ended up talking on a range of different media platforms, This Morning, Channel 4, ABC 2020 in New York, and pretty much went around the world. And that gave me a massive opportunity, really, to talk about not only how difficult it's been for me, but how difficult it is for thousands of people out there who are struggling from whether it be OCD or body dysmorphic disorder. And I also wanted to come from a male angle as well. The fact that actually males do experience body image issues. And I think it was really, really important to speak about that. So I was very, very fortunate that my story went viral. At times it was difficult because, as you can imagine, someone with BDD, then going in front of cameras and things like that. So it was the biggest exposure task I've ever done. But actually it gave me a platform and also gave me the confidence after such a low period in my life to go back to my education, to campaign more, to become a director of mental health at a think tank, to go on to do a PhD, and obviously to get involved in politics too. So all of this sort of stuff has kind of driven me from that point. I've been doing this for the last 10 years at least. I'm just kind of speaking about and speaking about and speaking about it. And I'm in a very, I'm very, very privileged to have had that opportunity.
Yeah, you've done incredible things, and it's not easy going viral, especially something like that. Just going back to the actual experience of your darkest points, was it a gradual process to 10 hours a day in the mirror and taking a lot of selfies and really scrutinizing, or was it a gradual build-up that you can look back now and see the signs were there from a lot earlier? Because was it around 14, 15?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So yeah, was it a gradual process, or is there a point where you can recognize um, that it had entered that next level?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think back then I didn't recognize it. And sometimes when I look back now, I think, how did I not recognize that? There was clear warning signs that I was going into a really dark place. And it started very gradually of, just spending an extra half an hour in the mirror before school and scrutinizing how I looked. And then it went to an hour and then 2 hours. And then I started to take photos of myself and scrutinize it. And then do grooming rituals. So moisturize a lot, put loads of spot cream on, and then take pictures again to see if it improved. And then obviously losing a lot of weight at the same time. And gradually it just became untenable for me to stay in the classroom because I was spending all my hours of the day terrified about the way I looked. And to put it bluntly, it was hell on earth, really. And then to drop out of education, go and, become housebound, completely withdraw from school, from everything I knew, and just spending every single day for a good 6 months, just pulling myself apart. And that was, that would be difficult for anyone, but it was just really, really difficult. And, I reached my lowest point. Thankfully, I haven't got to that point again. But I reached a really low point. And, I'm not embarrassed to say it was a very risky stage. But thankfully, nothing happened. And I was able from that point to reach out, get the support I needed. And another shout out to the Maudsley Hospital because they picked me up again and gave me incredible support. And I was very lucky again to have that support. But I think one of the things to touch on as well in this is that both my parents are mental health professionals. Slight irony there. But they're both mental health professionals. And, for them, it was so difficult because they didn't know what to do. They, for them, it was really, really difficult. So, when you've got a situation where your own parents who are mental health professionals don't really know what to do because it's their own son, it got really, really difficult. So, yeah, it was a very, very difficult time, but I'm really glad that, I spoke out about it and raised awareness of it because it's only then that we can kind of generate interest, engagement, and we can start to make sure people get the support that they need. And you've done so much of that, Paddy, as well. So just a shout out to you there.
Well, thank you. But coming from you, like it's incredible. I think I saw a quote of yours where you said you didn't know that boys could experience BDD.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it is so important for people to see your story. Do you think there was an extra element of shame because of your gender and because, you talked about grooming rituals and selfies? This is something that as a society, typically associate with girls and women. I think that's part of the reason why you withdrew from everything and made it worse.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's two issues here. I think the first issue is the sense of shame that men feel if they suffer from body image issue, because as you rightly said, it's very much associated with women. And, you know, as a young guy, you don't really want to be seen as the one that's worried about your appearance. I mean, we've all been at school, we know what that's like. And the idea of going into a rugby changing room and saying, you know, lads, I'm worried that my nose is too big, or I'm worried, you know, that my skin's bad, the abuse that you get. So it was really difficult, and I didn't really want to open up about it, partially because I was a man. I think also the second part of that is that also clinicians didn't, you know, immediately think when a man comes into their, you know, to see them that, oh, they must be suffering from a body image disorder. They probably think depression or anxiety, and it may be a mix, absolutely. But, you know, I think there's a lot of young men who are probably going underdiagnosed with these issues, partially because they're not coming forward, but also partially because, you know, they feel a sense of, the clinician themselves is not recognizing them sort of symptoms in men.
Yeah, I mean, I played rugby up until a few years ago, and the idea that you could go in and talk about taking selfies, even the coaches. I remember when a few scenarios where people would come in different kind of clothes or talk about different kind of shampoo, and you get ripped apart by adults as well as fellow kids.
Yeah.
And it sends a shiver down my spine thinking about that, especially in the rugby environment. And another thing that I thought about is around social media and the digital world. And, you know, selfies are only an invention of the last 20 years. Do you think that you can directly attribute your experience to the rise of social media? Or do you think that if it wasn't social media and wasn't selfies, it could have been something else?
I mean, it's two sides. I mean, I guess on the one hand, it doesn't mean I wouldn't have experienced body dysmorphic disorder or OCD. That may have happened anyway. I mean, I suffered from OCD prior to all that. But I think in my case, it amplified everything. So, and this wasn't, you know, it's not even what we've got now where young people are facing immense pressure on social media. But I had experiences where people would put nasty comments or things like that. And also there was this big culture of you need to get as many likes as you possibly can. And all of that combined puts an added element, where as a young person, even back then, you felt like if I'm getting abuse online, it must be true. Or if I'm not getting enough likes, there's a reason for it. And I think I internalized a lot of that as it's the way I look. Other people may internalize it differently, but for me, it was all about the way I looked. I was worried that, oh, well, you know, these people don't like me because I look the way I do. So it had a very big problem. It had a very big impact on me, I'd say. Now, where we go from here in relation to kind of social media is really, really difficult because it seems to be becoming more and more sophisticated as time goes on. But, you know, I do not want to see any young person experiencing what I experienced in this current age where we, you know, have vastly more sophisticated networks on social media, and it's becoming very, very difficult for young people.
Yeah, as you say, it's social media is ever evolving, and this all happened kind of 10 years ago when it was still in its formative years, really. And I think that's why potentially, do you think it went so kind of viral? I think one of the headlines I saw was like UK's first selfie addiction. Do you think there was that wow factor of this is new? And you think if it was the same story now, there'd be a different response?
That's a really, really good point. So I think, well, there's a positive there in many ways. So when I first released my story, it was that sort of wow factor. And that had positives and negatives in the sense that it gave me the opportunity to really open up and explain and talk about my experience. and the dangers of social media. On the other hand, back then, it also came with hundreds of comments of abuse, which, was difficult as well, which is the irony that I was talking about social media and then simultaneously getting abuse for talking about social media. But there's a positive there as well, in the sense that, we passed legislation on this in the UK, the Online Safety Act, which is a good piece of legislation. There's a lot more we can do, in my opinion, but now it's not seen as an issue. Everybody recognizes that social media is an issue that we need to combat, and we recognize the mental health impact on especially young people who are growing up online. And that has probably intensified because of the pandemic as well, where they were spending more time online, more time at home, and all of that sort of stuff. But even before that, young people are growing up in a very online world, which comes with, it's extremely detrimental. And in the past, I've actually called on social media companies to get a grip at this, because we can pass as much legislation as possible, but legislation is very slow and it's not going to be able to keep up with the changes that are happening. So actually it takes social media companies to work very closely with governments to actually try and support people. And there's some progress in that direction, but there's a lot more that can be done.
Oh, I'm just so full of admiration for you sharing your story, like especially sharing your story around social media and that going viral, and you still, looking back and saying like you were lucky and it was a really good thing, which I think for the world, like I can agree is a good thing, but from your perspective, I have so much admiration. Was there ever a time where you regretted opening up?
Yeah, I'd be completely honest with you. Absolutely. There's always moments where you think, oh, should I have opened up for that? If someone Googles me now, they'll see other stuff, but then they'll see that, and then what will they think? But sometimes things are bigger than what people think, and I think it's more important that I did that and that I opened up about that, and spoke about it than anything else. And I think that's really, really important. It also gave me very, very good training for dealing with abuse in politics. So I think it was a good training ground for all of that sort of stuff. But I hope it also got over the message that actually, it contributed the 0.1% to the kind of push towards it's not a weakness, and opening up about these things is really, really important. And there's been so many, great young campaigners, including you, Paddy, who have pushed us forward even more. And I think that's what it's all about. It's like putting in that effort, opening up, and you're the future. You can keep it going even further. And that's what it's all about.
Thank you. I appreciate your kind words. And one final question, I guess, about this story itself. And something that I noticed was, I guess, a lot of the language used in the news reports. So like selfie addict took 200 a day, and there was references in, maybe it was other time, but talking of like committed suicide or this kind of thing. Do you think we've moved on a lot in the last 10 years, or do you still think we have an issue with the way the media and social media portrays mental health?
Yeah, I think we've gone through a cycle, right? That, if you think kind of 2010 to 2015, I remember talking to people about this. They said, the media loved talking about mental health, and they started to portray it in a really positive thing, and actually encouraging people being open about their mental health. And I think there was a period between 2010, actually maybe a bit later, 2017, 2018, 2019, where there was a really, really positive push to open up about mental health. I think what we've got to do now is really open up the conversation and become more sophisticated about what we're doing. And we've kind of reduced a lot of the stigma, but now we need to make sure people actually get the support. And that's what's really, really important to me is, there's a lot of people now who are coming forward, being really brave, opening up about their mental health, whilst when they turn up to services, they aren't able to get support. And that's where we need to target our attention. You know, you did some brilliant work with the mental health hubs. What an amazing idea. And that's going to be something we can really use to support young people in particular moving forward. But I think the media as a whole needs to continue that narrative that actually mental health is nothing to be ashamed of. We need to keep moving forward. There's still a lot more work to do, and we need to work with the media to support that work.
So I think you've got a really interesting perspective given your kind of role in politics. And you said that without your experience, your really lowest point, you wouldn't have got into politics. What was it about the experience that led you to get into politics?
I think because I saw, mass inequalities, in the sense I experienced them a lot of them, right? So I dropped out of education. I saw that there wasn't enough support in education for young people with mental health problems. I saw a lot of people being kind of written off. I was like a lot of people waiting for mental health support that couldn't access it for a long time and had to travel 300 miles to get that support. And I also had to experience the steep climb back up as well, and all the challenges that come with that. So I think everything I do in politics now is led by that, in the sense that, I don't forget my own experience and my own background and the people who are experiencing the same things now. I don't want another young boy like me to go through that same experience, or girl, or anyone to go through that experience, because it's so horrible, it's so awful, and we need to build policies and ideas that can support those people. And that's why I got into politics. I probably wouldn't have gotten into politics without this experience. So, it's a very solid foundation. I'm always learning in the role, but it's such a great opportunity to try and support trying to make a difference in that sense.
Yeah, I see so many parallels because I would say I was politicised by COVID when I was at my worst point. And how old were you? You're a member of the Conservative Party. How old were you when you first joined?
So I was 18 years old when I first joined the Conservative Party. So David Cameron was our leader at that time.
Did you always know that you were a Conservative?
I never really thought about it before. I think that my own experience had a big impact on me. I think, I from the Northeast. Traditionally, that's been quite a Labour area. I grew up in a pretty kind of centrist Labour family. But I think what really attracted me was the idea of aspiration, the idea of kind of working hard, all of these sort of things, personal responsibility, community, all of these sort of things attracted me to it. But it's funny, all of this, because it kind of feels like it was so informed by my own experience that it was a conscious choice at that time. And it's been an incredible opportunity to be part of the party and to kind of go through them sorts of kind of processes and all of that. So it's been a real pleasure.
You do have a role within the party. It's the Conservative Mental Health Group. That's right,
Yes.
isn't it? And what is your role? And did you get involved as soon as you started with or joined the Conservative Party, or has it been more recent?
No, it was more recent. So one of my good friends started the group, and I got involved a bit later. And it's this idea of kind of forming policy, doing research, communicating within kind of as a group obviously an independent group aligned with the Conservative Party, and really trying to think of positive policies and ideas that can support people. So we've touched on, I think, everything from like veterans to young people, to farming, all of these kind of different kind of shoots from mental health. And we're really, working really, really hard to try and kind of raise the importance and get it into the kind of policy development as well. So we've got a great group of people that are really working hard. And I think, it's important people know that, the Conservatives are trying to work on this, and I think it's important that every party works on this, because there are certain issues that are too important to be divisive on, and actually this is one of them. And we need to, as much as possible, try to collaborate and work together to make sure that, as I spoke about, those young people who may be experiencing what I experienced get the support that they need. Because at the end of the day, that's what it should be all about.
Yeah, you will have no disagreement about mental health being above politics, and I have so much admiration. I think as a group, whatever your politics, I think the Conservative Mental Health Group is a group to look at and learn from, because I think it's doing really, really impressive stuff. It's not just saying this is a problem, but actually putting forward solutions. And that's what we really need. It's easy to complain and moan, but actually putting forward those positive solutions is really important. And I guess that's also part of your role, is it? So what's your official role in the group?
So I'm head of research and strategy at the group. So I do a lot of the kind of research side, a lot of the geeky stuff, which is my PhD's probably helped with that. I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to mental health as well. So I get into the data, and it's really all about just developing policy and making sure that policy is backed up with sound evidence, and it's actually going to make a difference. And I guess it's one of those roles that I've found really, really interesting, but also it's a real challenge, because mental health is a very difficult issue to solve as a policy area, because it touches every area of policy. So you kind of go in and you're thinking, well, do we focus on housing here? Do we focus on social security? Do we focus on the NHS? Do we focus? All of these areas are kind of interconnected. So you've got to kind of create a very broad agenda and try and think about how you can create policies that are going to cover all bases, which is really, really hard, especially when you've got cost constraints too, because it's a difficult one. But I'm looking forward to continuing to try and develop different things as we move forward.
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because as you say, mental health is so intertwined with everything else. And all these different issues, and that's one challenge. But also, I'm interested in what you think. I think another challenge that I see is actually researching mental health and treatments and say the hubs. It's very hard to quantitatively prove the effectiveness of certain measures, and a lot of the measures that we want to introduce, campaigners want to introduce, such as the hubs, will only start getting results in 10, 15 years. Is this something that you found, and how can we elevate this issue and ensure that the way politics works is all about the next election, but how can we break that and ensure that mental health is something that's looked at?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's part of the working as cross-party as you possibly can on it, because we need a very long-term strategy on this. You mentioned the mental health hubs. It takes a long time to develop the data and to make sure that data is correct, and it's normally checked again and again and again. There's been a pilot process, and then you go on and there. So it's very much, we have to look long-term in issues like mental health. But also simultaneously develop as we go as well, because, if you think of some of the technological advances over 10 years, if we're thinking of things like digital therapy or support in that way, we have to kind of go as that goes as well. But I think back to even psychological therapies. So I'm going to nerd out here for a second, so I apologize.
No, please.
But psychological therapies was obviously first put forward by Lord Richard Layard of the ID. Kind of put forward the economic argument. He demonstrated that people access psychological therapies, they're likely to recover. They're less likely to not be in employment. They're more likely to stay in education. All of these kind of core ideas. And he did this very complex kind of economic cost-benefit analysis thing. And over the last 10, 15 years, they've gradually adjusted it. And now it's something that's used pretty much rolled out across the country. It was called Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. I think it's called Talking Therapies now, the service. So that was something that took a long time to really roll out. But in a sense, you kind of want to get it right because, these are really, really important interventions that you need to make sure are correct. So things like the mental health hubs, even though I'm very, very impressed by them, I think it's going to take time to collect that data to make sure that they work on a national basis, but also a local basis, making sure that they're right for specific communities, making sure that we can adapt them maybe slightly. And all of that is really important to make sure that we're not only delivering that support, but it's the right support for people that need it.
Yeah, I like the nerdiness. I think it's really interesting because I kind of, in my kind of layman's head, I put it down to kind of a heart versus head, and we can tell our stories and people can find them upsetting and think we need to do something about this. But actually, we've also got to persuade based on economics and based on the way that this can help growth and can help all these other things that are so important. And I think, from my point of view, that's a route to getting people on board and that cross-party support.
Absolutely. And also really important like chances, right? So if we can demonstrate that things like mental health hubs are going to make sure that a young person doesn't drop out of education, or, an adult, if we expand out to adults, remains in employment, or, that's all as equally as important to me as the economic side, because they all work together. And we need to take everything into account when we're building these policies.
Yeah, hopefully with the work that you're doing, and we can get cross-party consensus. You mentioned your PhD, and that was all about mental health as well, wasn't it?
It was. There's a theme running through all of this.
Yeah.
So my PhD was on the politics of mental health policy. So I interviewed politicians, I scoped manifestos, and I tried to track how mental health has changed, attitudes has changed, why politicians had become really engaged in it. And there's some interesting findings from that in relation to how different parties look at it. And all of this information is really useful, specifically when, trying to, engage with politicians, knowing how people think about mental health and understand mental health and how they can inform how policies develop. So really thinking about that is important. It was a very stressful experience doing my PhD, but it was. I'm hoping it will be worth it in the end.
I think it could make a whole podcast on itself, because I'm so interested in this kind of thing as a politics nerd and a mental health nerd.
Best kind.
Yeah, it sounds incredible. Was there anything that you found that was surprising, or did it kind of follow what you believed in anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I think what was interesting is tracking it over a period of time. So there was they always say when you do research, you normally find what you expected to find. And to an extent, that was true that, when I interviewed politicians from the 1980s to like the early 2000s, a lot of it was about risk, violence, concern, that sort of stuff, which reflects what kind of happened at that time. Then we start to move to a more kind of anti-stigma kind of part. And then after that, it becomes slightly more sophisticated about how we're thinking about mental health. There's a couple of concerns around different elements of it. A lot of the debates that are going on now, actually, it came up as well. So it was really interesting to track that, and then also digging into that and trying to see, well, what's this party saying? What's that party saying? How do they differ? How does that link in with their ideology anyway? And there was some connection there, that they tend to apply a lot of their own ideology to how they looked at mental health, which is absolutely fine if, as long as they're engaging in mental health and it's a positive difference. So that was quite an interesting thing to do. But I think also just doing the PhD itself was a good, interesting thing for your mental health as well, because it's a tough old business doing a PhD, and it's not always easy. So that was a lesson in resilience for me, I think.
You also work at a university now, don't you?
Yeah, so I was an academic, lectured. It was one of the things I absolutely loved, lecturing students, because as a politics nerd, and also the opportunity to try and make it really interesting to students and engage with them was a really, really, it's an amazing experience to be able to do. And I think it's also close to my heart as well, because, I didn't have always the best start with education, and I've kind of learned the importance of how great it is and how great it's been for me. So I want to kind of pass that on as best I can. I mean, I'm not sure what my students would say about me, but I've tried my best to be a good lecturer, and to deliver, classes that are interesting.
Well, when I look back at school, the teachers that all stood out were the ones who loved what they taught and had a passion for it. And I think you can tell when somebody genuinely really cares about what they're teaching. So yeah, I reckon your students would have seen that. And so you've done so many different things and so many different things around mental health. Do you have plans for the future of like ways you want to further impact policy and change how mental health is viewed? Is elected politics something you go into, or are you happy in the background in think tanks and policy research?
Yeah, well, obviously, I stood at the 2024 parliamentary elections in Liverpool, Garston. It was a real nail biter election. I wasn't going to be a winner. So in the future, if that opportunity came up again, I'd be delighted to give it another go. But I think for me, it's always thinking about, well, how can I make the biggest difference in what I'm doing, because this is what started as kind of a campaign way back, has kind of just become almost a lifestyle for me, that this is something I deeply care about. This is something I want to spend a very, very long time doing. So I've got to think about moving forward. What's the best way to make that difference, and to really help people. And I think that's kind of what I'm it's not really an answer, but it's kind of what I'm going through right now, kind of thinking, well, how can I best make that difference, and how can I have the biggest impact I can, and work with some great people who are doing the same thing.
It's so difficult, isn't it, to think about how you can best influence policy and get the changes you want, especially when you've got that lived experience. I'm just interested in the election. Obviously, Liverpool in 2024, I think everybody saw the way the tide was going, and Liverpool, more than most places you could have predicted. But what did you learn maybe about yourself during the election campaign?
I think I learned my resilience. I think, one thing I can say about my experience, and this should be a message for anyone who dares say, people are weak within now, is that, actually, it's almost like it was training to do things in politics, because you have to be really resilient, especially in a campaign that's where it's a difficult seat when you're trying your best. And I think you've got to almost have that kind of drive and resilience, and also take the ups and downs of the process. I mean, I was very lucky as well that I had a great candidate that I was working with at the time, who supported me a lot and passed on a lot of his wisdom. which I was incredibly grateful for. But I think it taught me a lot about, the resilience that I gained over a long period of time. And I think, if Paddy, if you ever want to get into, go into politics, I think you'd be incredibly resilient too. So it's definitely been a fascinating thing, and it's another thing I never regretted it. It was something I really, really enjoyed, and especially just engaging with actually a lot of young people. I did a sort of thing with a charity and listening to young people and what they had to say, and their ideas for moving forward as well was one of the great things of that. And then of course after that, I then did a speech on the main stage at a party conference. So that was, it almost felt a bit like full circle, that it was a real pleasure, and yet again another exposure task right there, putting yourself in front of a lot of people and some cameras, and trying to do the best job you can.
As you're talking, actually, I was thinking about the similarities, I guess, between the campaign and struggling, and especially when I struggled, like that uphill battle, and waking up every day, kind of knowing what the result of the day is going to be, but still trying to put one foot in front of the other. And I think that is it's really important, and I learned I learned so much from that period when I was at my lowest, about just putting one foot in front of the other, and it's given me so much confidence going forward. That it might be hard, but it's not as hard as back then. And if I can get it through it back then I can get through whatever's in front of me now.
I was just going to say, and you've done incredibly well. And I think also one of the things I'd encourage you to do is just step back and look at how far you've come, because you've done so well, and what you're doing now is so important. So I think you've taken that one step in front of the other, but you've also done an incredible amount of work that is has helped a lot of people as well. So just remember that one as well.
Oh, thank you. I don't want to make it too much of a loving, but I could say the same thing. I think, yeah, it's just so incredibly important. And as we're coming to the end, I just want to go back to your mental health now, and how you are now. You mentioned that thankfully you've not gone into that really dark place to the same extent again. What are some of the strategies that you've kind of put in place that have enabled you to maintain more positive mental health?
Yeah, so I think a big thing for me, you probably see I've run a lot of half marathons and things like that, and it's not for
Ultra marathons.
Ultra marathons as well, but that was its own story, that one. Yeah, wow, that was an experience. But that's really good for me. It's not a good mechanism for everyone, but for me, the idea of going on a run, switching off, putting some music in, is really, really good, and doing it in a very balanced way is brilliant for me. And then obviously being able to run for charity as well is an added element. I think, and this is the honest answer, I think sometimes I'm a work in progress. So I think the strategies that I put in place sometimes need to be tweaked. As you can probably imagine, I sometimes struggle to switch off. So I have to constantly think about, okay, well, is a jog the right thing tonight, or should I do something else? Should I just sit downstairs and watch Netflix? And sometimes that's the best thing I can do. Put a Christmas movie on. It's great. There's so many on at the moment. So it's adapting really with how I'm feeling, but switch Netflix on, go for a run. All of these things are really, really beneficial.
That balance is a really difficult one, and one that I struggle with, because we care so passionately about what we're doing that we constantly want to do more and more. But I have to ask about an ultramarathon. The fact that you didn't mention it. If I ran an ultramarathon, everybody would be knowing about it. So you ran it for a veterans mental health charity.
Yeah,
just talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I ran for Combat Stress, which is a fantastic charity that supports veterans with their mental health, and also serving service people. So it's a great organization, which drove me on during my training, and it was a a very long run down the Northumberland coastline, which, if you've ever been to Northumberland, is incredibly steep. And I don't know what I was thinking. I think the PhD just got to me, and I signed up for an ultramarathon. I've got to be honest with you, Paddy. I'm not sure if I'll do it again. It was quite the experience. It was a mix between like sand and rocky bits, and oh, it was interesting. I mean, I'm doing the London Marathon next year. I think that's where I'll stay for now. But it was cool. I mean, the idea of doing it in Northumberland as well, where I'm from, was amazing. And if you've ever been to Northumberland, it's an absolutely stunning coastline, which kind of kept me going. I'm not sure if I got the right mix because you see the people running and they've got the gels, they've got like 10 Mars bars in their pocket here, and I'm not quite sure I got the right mix on that because I was flagging a couple of times, but hopefully I'll learn from the professionals a bit better and get better at that.
It's incredible. It sounds like an absolute worst nightmare, especially on the hills. But yeah, it's amazing. And the question that I like to ask everybody on the podcast, but also just in general life, if you go back to the younger Danny, maybe in your lowest point, what would you say to him? What advice would you give to him?
That's a really good question. I mean, the obvious one is be a bit kinder to yourself. But I think just enjoy your childhood a bit more. Don't take yourself too seriously. I think it was one of those things at the time when I was in such a serious, weird situation that I'm sure more people than I knew were going through as well. But it felt like such a weird alien situation that I was in, that I think actually just getting kind of a bit of joy out of the small things, that would be my advice. Just try to enjoy the childhood. And this would be my advice to anyone growing up now, is that just try to enjoy your childhood and enjoy the small things, because honestly, you realize when you get a little bit older that all the things you worried about when you were a teenager are not that important. And when you get 10 years down the line, no one really thinks or cares about it. So
that's great advice. And would you like to shout out anything? I can link your London Marathon link in the description. Is there anything else you want to shout out?
No, I mean, it's I've encouraged everyone to engage in mental health. Of course, listen to this podcast and engage in mental health. Support anyone who's going through a difficult time. All of these things. It sounds like the bread and butter, but it's so important that we all continue to speak about this issue, engage with this issue, and yes, if you do have a spare 50 pence or a pound, any amount of money. I know it's Christmas coming up, so it's a financially testing time. But if you do have a spare pound, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Danny. I really appreciate you being so open and the conversation we've had. I've learned so much. It's been incredible. And I think we could have talked for another hour because stick two nerds in a call together. And there's only one outcome, but thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure, Paddy. Thank you so much. And thank you. Keep up the great work you're doing. Because you're making a real difference there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for listening. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the support. And I guess I'll catch you in the next one. Once again, thank you so much for listening to Now We're Really Talking. If anything in this episode has brought up difficult feelings for you, please reach out for support. You don't have to go through it alone. If you're in the UK, you can contact Samaritans on 116 123 or contact Shout by texting 85258 or visit mind.org.uk for mental health support. If you're listening from outside the UK, you can find international helplines at findahelpline.com. Remember, there's always help out there, and talking about it is a strength, not a weakness.